Okay, I guess we are live. So this is an experimental live chat. We'll see how it goes. My name is Homa Tavangar, and I am with my good friends and colleagues, Eric Dozier and Will Richardson. And there's all this sound feedback coming. I don't know if anyone else is hearing it. Um, so we want to have just an open conversation um, around how we navigate teaching and learning. Really, it's about conversations, how we navigate having conversations at school with our students, with people who may not share the same political or worldview. Is it even possible? How do we begin? This is not meant to be a teaching tip webinar type thing, but more of um, the three of us in conversation. And what I'm really excited about and what I'm really grateful for is obviously Will, Eric, and I come from different backgrounds. We probably share a lot in our perspective, but clearly we represent different demographics, different heritage, and so we just want to be in an honest conversation. Um, this conversation came out of, we were going to do a special live event um, in anticipation of our Deeper Than Diversity event. And so rather than just focus on Deeper Than Diversity, tonight we want to think about going deeper than the election. And um, we talked about a lot of nerves are frayed and people are really anxious about how the vote is going to turn out. So we also want to hold space for a little bit of reflection and just kind of honesty and truth telling. So very informally, Eric is away from his keyboard, so he usually would share something with his keyboard, and we're kind of making him do this. So I want to turn it over to Eric to share maybe a little reflection to kind of center us to just begin to have that conversation.
All right, that sounds good. So, I am. I'll share this song with you, just to kind of get us going, because I mean, around election time, everybody wants to talk about freedom and their rights and all that they have you know, all that they have the right to do. And what I find a lot of times is, and what I've seen, unfortunately, is you know kind of a lot of selfishness, when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And we tend to talk about our rights, but to me, there's something about American politics now that has a very conditional nature about it. I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying, but like when I think about, I guess what I'm saying is that folks want their rights, but they're not necessarily willing to stand up for the rights of other people. And so I wanted to share this song in honor of Ella Baker. And this was a song that was composed by Sweet Honey and the Rock, a group that is led by Bernice Johnson Reagan, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, who is a curator at the Smithsonian. And these are the words of Ella Baker. And I'll just share a little bit of that with you all right now. We who believe in freedom cannot rest We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men and black mother sons is as important as the killing of white men and white mother sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. That which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light as they carry us through the gale. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
Woohoo.
All right.
That was awesome.
There we go. Ella Baker.
Thank you.
Good start.
This is so much better than a Twitter chat. Wow. It was like, do this or do a
That bar
Twitter
is very
chat.
low. Yes.
Yes.
No comparison. Wow. Thank you. It made me think about poll worker or the people counting the ballots. They're not resting.
Right.
And
Right.
interesting. I feel like so one of the things that we were talking about before we went live is just this idea of there are so many lessons that are coming to light. There's so much that is it just like, the data, there's so much. It's like, where do you even begin with the lessons? So one of the lessons that I was thinking about that maybe can help us just begin the conversation is as we look at the data and how the data is what's being released. And one example is that pundits are surprised that Hispanic voters are not voting as a monolith, that they aren't all voting. Maybe it's a small percentage, but it's still more than what they expected. They're not voting in that single way, in a single direction as was expected. And I feel like that's, what we want to explore here. And also, I love people are writing in the chat. Please do. And we'll try to answer questions and try to make this as interactive as we can. Just this idea, like, okay, what can we learn from what's emerging? One thing is that the people who had the perspective that Trump was doing okay still feel that way. That, but not even going there. Like, I don't know how much I want to go in that direction. But this idea that we are so used to, we've kind of learned to not think with cognitive complexity. We're not approaching issues in complex ways, and people are complicated. and populations are complicated. And if you have, we always talk about in the deeper than diversity stuff is relationship. If you have relationships with Hispanic, Latinx friends, you know that from Mexico to the tip of Chile and everywhere in between, there is such wide variation. So why would you not think that the Latinx population in the United States would reflect that? And is it because we're not being taught that? Is it because we try to just digest everything down into simple sound bites? And that's the way we're doing teaching and learning too. So it's sort of like this learning these qualities of a citizen include learning about people and variation and culture. And the data is showing, like, how can you not, right? So
Right.
that's just kind of one point that's been just kind of nagging at me without going into a lot of things that are bothering me.
But it's
Well,
interesting because I
I
think,
believe that. Oh, go ahead, Will. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say it's interesting because you're trying to walk a line that I think a lot of teachers are trying to walk, and it's a hard line to walk, right? You don't want to get partisan to talk about politics because then basically conversations about politics tend to shut down when they move into a kind of a partisan arena. And again, just that was something that I was tweeting out this morning too about this friend of ours who he's actually a junior at our local high school. He's actually an African American from the Congo, and basically I asked him, so at school, are they talking about the election? And he just kind of laughed and said, no one talks about the election in school. And I was like, you're kidding. He goes, no, there's too much fear to talk about the election. There's just too much polarization. There's too many layers of potential anger, and you know what I'm saying. And so I think it does, we talk about these existential questions all the time, but I think it does ask a huge question. How do we get out of this? Because I think education has a lot to do with it. I think education has a lot to do with us being here, in the ways in which we tell kids that there's usually only one answer, that there's not a lot of nuance, that it's all about competition, that it's all about, kind of raising your status and using education as a vehicle for more prestige and, whatever else, a higher paying job and the way we define success, all of it, right? So if we can't have conversations, not just about the political process, but about the social justice issues, about the environmental issues, about the economic issues, because we're too afraid that some parent or someone else is going to get mad at us. I think you end up in a situation that we're in right now, with people
Right.
who are just retreating to their echo chambers and believing what they want to believe. And I don't know how we get out of this, to be honest, if we can't have those conversations.
And I think that at the heart of and I think about that quite a bit, because when I work with children, and we want to talk about, because a lot of the music that I do, say for instance, like that piece from the words of Ella Baker. So Ella Baker was one of the, she was the head of, she was kind of the mentor for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so, of course, that song is a very political song, and I teach it to children, and I talk to them about the context of the music. And most of my music, at least the foundations of my music really sit on that, kind of in that, 60s and 70s protest soul vein. And so, that's one of the ways that I kind of engage the political landscape. And the way that I have to look at it is, at its core, what politics is just the way people are organized, the way people organize themselves, right? And so, but like even that basic level of conversation is not happening in most schools. just looking at and being able to examine, um, uh, just different ways that people organize themselves. So if you look at our nation, you know, people also organize themselves in congregations. They organize themselves, in intimate communal networks as well. And so even starting there with just kind of a basic understanding is that people organize themselves in particular ways to get things done. And then maybe insert some questions into that. Okay, who are they getting things done for? And then maybe have young people explore what should, one question that Homa asked when we do our workshop, and it's when we talk about this quote that says, "Be a friend to the whole human race." And what if we like took a quote like that, or just any quote about be a better neighbor to your neighbor or whatever, and say, okay, young people, build a political system around that value, like that one statement of value. What would it look like? And then ask them, would it look like what we're seeing right now? Because if anything is happening now that I see is that people are just not, like, there is, I mean, it's almost, I don't know, it's just so much madness or anger. Like everything is angry. And I'm just like, really? What are we, can't we figure out how to do something that actually helps everybody? But we don't even have a system that allows for that conversation. And that's what troubles me the most about it, is that there is no system to where we can actually bring people with opposing opinions into a room together and have any kind of discussion, because there really is there's very little camaraderie in this country, I believe, like at least outside of the silo. So I mean, how do you teach kids to even not take a side, but have them create or explore or even have general conversations like that about how should we organize ourselves so that it works well for everybody.
Well, but I think that's what the role of school is. I think one
Right.
of the magic secret sauce of what the potential of school is that it's not like Sunday morning where people are segregated and they choose, which, church or whatever they go to, yoga class, church, whatever.
Right.
Um, it, it's the one institution which is supposed to throw everyone together. And that's why I think that it is the job of education to educators to learn how to have difficult conversations and courageous conversations. So I think, like, that's where leaders come in, establishing certain norms. Here's how you have a conversation with someone you disagree with. There's a ton of public assets out there that people can learn from in terms of how do you begin to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you. What if that was like a central part of the curriculum?
Right.
And I was thinking, I took a walk with my daughter today. It's a beautiful day in Pennsylvania, in spite of the many unknown factors still, I think, still outstanding. I haven't gotten any alerts that anything's changed. But we were saying, like, what if the math curriculum had how, taught kids how to analyze the defense budget? What if that was just part of your basic education, that you understood how to analyze those kind of numbers? And then you'd be able to make up your mind and have a sane conversation with someone that sees the role of the military different from you.
Right. I remember when I first took the job at the Episcopal School of Nashville, I was talking to the head of the school one day, and he said, if you really want to understand where an institution's values lie, you should look at their line item budget and see
Yeah.
where they put most of their money. And like what, yeah, and I mean, to your point, like what if we, what if we had, that would be an incredible way to use math. Is like look at the line item budget, figure it out, and even comment on what the company values based on where they put their money.
Yeah.
So it could be values and mathematics together.
Totally.
Um, and if they wanted to shift into a new area, because I mean, where does most of our money go in this country? Military. Like that's where most of our money goes. And we outspend the everybody on the planet, maintaining weapons of destruction. And that's not just that's not just Republicans, that's Democrats, that's everybody. Nobody's really touching that budget, which tells me that we're not preparing, we're not doing things that are really preparing us to live in a peaceful world. Like our value system is really the values that go along with that, with maintaining a world at war. The values that go along with that are competition. I have to win. I have to be stronger, bigger, badder than everybody else. There is no compromise because I have the biggest gun. And so there's a whole, slew of values that go along that and things that you can deduce about a budget that says that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that most of the people in the country are warmongers, but it does say something about the folks that are spending the money and making the budget.
I think it also says something about critical thinking. Like, are
Right,
we thinking critically? Are we
right,
teaching our kids to critically think about this? And Robert Ponton just commented we could start with having students and parents have a discussion of where their school money goes. That could be really
right.
dangerous. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, reactive. A lot of times people will react without necessarily having the information. Will, did
Right.
you want to say something about, did you want to,
Well,
a little
sure.
while ago?
There's so much to say about this, right? And I think we do. I think so. For years now, we've been bandying around all these
Got
C
it.
words in education. Critical thinking and collaboration, and all those other things, right? Character. Um, I
Creativity.
think
Yeah.
I think a part of yeah, I think a part of it is curiosity, and that we're not curious any longer in general. We're just fine with believing what other people are telling us to believe.
Right.
We're not really engaged to go out and figure things out for ourselves. And so I think school has a lot to do with that too. And I know it sounds like I'm throwing school under the bus here, and in some ways I am, because I don't think that many, as people who've heard me speak or write or whatever else, know. I think there's a lot of stuff that we do in school that makes absolutely no common sense. I think there's a lot of things we do in this political system that make absolutely no common sense as well, right? So when you have situations where on their face people are kind of going, why do we do that? I mean, that is not a great condition for building trust in any institution. When everybody's asking, why do we do that? Like, what's this electoral college thing? I mean, seriously, why do we do that? Or why do we put kids in rows? Why do we silo out curriculum? Why do we age group kids when none of those things are great conditions for learning? So I think there's a whole kind of coming together of many different things that are are leaving us in a space where we just kind of don't really engage on an intellectual level. We don't really have the curiosity that we probably need in order to have a functioning democracy. But here's the deal: when you take that situation and then you layer on top of it this epistemic crisis that we have, where there is no truth, there are no facts, there are alternative facts, and all that kind of stuff. That's just a recipe for, I don't even know what the word is, right? But it's certainly not good for any path forward for a healthy democracy. If we can't agree on facts, we're screwed.
Right.
Plain and simple,
Right.
we're screwed. We're not going to survive that. So
And
to
this
me,
is
that's.
oh,
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna add to what you're saying. Elaine Montgomery's comment. My experience with volunteering in public schools is that students are discouraged from talking at all. It is
Mhm.
considered not staying
Right.
focused.
Exactly right.
And it's like,
Right.
how are we going to have a democracy with conversation? If
Right.
school,
Right.
the nest where you should feel safe to do that.
Right.
Um,
And Michael, the U.S. Department of Admission. I mean, seriously, like how just like plain and vanilla is that, right?
Right.
I mean, you talk about no curiosity, there's no sense of agency or passion
Right.
or interest or anything in that statement. And so, I mean, we kind of reap what we sow. And again, I think that we're at a critical point, not just in this country, but around the world. Because if we can't agree on fact, then we're not going
Right.
to solve the democratic issues, the economic issues, the social justice issues, the climate issues. We're not going to solve any of those things if we can't start from a foundation that says, okay, well, this is true. Now, where we go from there, that's,
Hmm.
we can debate that and we can talk about what we do with that truth. But if we can't even start on that, then how do we fix any of it? How do we have those conversations? So I do think that it's the role of school right now. I've said this a couple times in the last couple months, and I'm not sure I 100% believe it, but I don't think there's anything more important right now than helping kids discern truth from fiction, um, you know, build those literacies and those dispositions to engage in conversations that are meaningful. Throw out 90% of the curriculum that we'll never use and that we'll forget as soon as the test is over. And let's spend
Right.
time putting kids into real world situations where they have to think critically, where they are, pursuing interesting projects that they care about. And then in the context of doing that, force them to think hard about it, challenge them in ways that will help them, build their muscles to figure out what the world is giving us, and how to navigate it and how to learn through it. I don't know. There's so much, but
well,
Right.
Steve Goldberg, hi, Steve, and Michael Champion, hi, Mike. Um, so Steve actually has a great assignment suggestion. He
Yeah.
said, my son and I were talking about how history books will talk about Trump's presidency and about this election. So here's a way you can have a real conversation, a real assignment without getting partisan. He said, I said it could be a fascinating assignment to write an entry for a 2050 textbook and write it from multiple perspectives. I love
Mm.
that. Like, what is how will history, we talk about writing a history of the future. That's an example of what it means to write a history of the future. So look back, look forward from a perspective of 30 years from now, look back. That's writing a history of the future. That's a fantastic assignment. How will history judge this moment? You need to know some history. You need to know some facts to there's a lot of learning in that assignment. I love that.
The
Mhm.
history of the future. I love that too. Anna, I thought you had a comment up there, but it seems to have disappeared. I don't know if you took it down or not, but I think you were asking about, are there schools out there that are doing this? Yeah, there are schools out there that are doing this.
Mhm.
High Tech High is one that is focused on problem solving and project based. Science Leadership Academy, Mount Vernon
Big
Presbyterian,
picture learning.
Big Picture Learning, Iowa Big. I mean, and that is the one thing I will say, or there are a couple things, but maybe the thing that gives me most optimism is that I'm seeing all sorts of iterations on this idea we call school. On
Right.
the There are lots of people now that are beginning to just say, yeah, that system, that narrative that we have about schools isn't working. It's not supporting, or it's not helping us. So let's build
Mhm.
something Let's try something different. All these micro schools, and
Right.
there's an equity and an access issue with those. Absolutely. Those spaces are in general probably not accessible for kids of color or kids in lower economic in lower socioeconomic homes. And we have to make sure that we do something about that, obviously, and that we work hard to make that equitable. But that's one good thing, right? I think people are looking at it going, we have to iterate, we have to change this because it's just not sustainable the way that we're doing it. And the pandemic is accelerating all of that too, by the way.
Right.
As horrible as this has been, if we are looking for some silver linings, as some people are calling them, I think that's definitely one of them. That a lot of people are going, yeah, we have to begin to think differently.
So
Right.
broken.
Right.
So much
Right.
is so broken.
Yeah. Yeah. I
All
mean,
right.
things that you were saying. I think when we talk about this whole notion of this, I think Will, the phrase that you used was this epistemic crisis.
Epistemic crisis. I love that phrase. That's not. I wish
I
I
like.
made that up. I didn't, but I love that phrase.
Oh,
Yeah. Go ahead.
oh. I thought I heard epistemic in there somewhere.
Yeah. No. Epistemic
We
crisis. Yeah.
did.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. So I like when I think that like that whole notion that there is no truth or no fact, there are no facts. And I think I brought this up to you the other day, Homa, is that I was listening to Dave Chappelle, and he was talking about when he was growing up, and I might as well say we. I think we're he may be a little younger than me, or we might be right about the same age. Uh, uh, but he said that when he was talking about television, television used to go off, and you see the eagle and the flag at midnight, and
Right.
all of that stuff.
Right.
You're that
And
old, Eric? You're that old that you remember that?
man,
Wow.
You fall asleep in front of the TV.
I'm shocked.
I'm,
And then
I'm,
there used
I'm,
to be
I'm over half a century now. I'm an old
but
dude now.
let's see how old you are, and then I'll let you get back to that story. But do you remember when the tone came on at the end of that and was just like boo for the
Yes,
rest of the
I
night?
remember. I remember, and then I remember watching Wolfman Jack on Saturday night.
Wow. Okay.
See,
I
yeah,
remember
You are
that.
old. You are old.
yeah, Wolfman
But anyway.
Jack. So I'm an old
Wow.
guy.
Blast from the past.
Yes, but like what I was thinking about is this notion. I remember, him. What he said was that, he feels sorry for the young people that have to grow up in the age of spin. And basically what he's talking about PR and propaganda and all these different things where there really has been this collapse in I guess what I would refer to as kind of intergenerational networked knowledge, right? Like these networks of knowledge that go across generations. And oftentimes, I think about that. I think about like where I got my sense of context from. And I really got it initially from growing up around 5 generations of my folks. Like I was on the planet with them at the same time, and they were passing on a legacy and a context and ways to think about where we're going, where we came from, all these different things. And I think that a lot of times like that's missing as well. And so you only really see yourself as you, as an individual, just kind of out here by yourself, and everybody else is like a supporting cast member, but you're the star of the show all the time. And then I remember one of my mentors saying this, and I don't know where he got the quote from. I don't know if it was his or but he said it in a class that I was taking. He says, "Woe be unto the nation in which every man thinks he is a nation." And that's where we are right now, is that, like now, you have these figures that are clamoring for our attention and our vote. And they're they amass the attention because, you know, they agree. We agree, or there are a number of people that agree with them, and then they cast their vote. And I know that that's very reductionist, but I also think about like why people choose churches. Like they don't like the pastor, they go to another church. You know, you don't like this, you go somewhere else because there's always somewhere else to go. And so it's not that people are really even there. It's like there's that's what I when I think about like the just the selfishness of that is like, how do you even get, I mean, folks are not even, they're not even really committed to the truth if they found it. You know, even if it's something that is actually better for them, like, because when you look at voter patterns, you can see that there are a lot of people that are still voting, you know, apparently
against their
against,
interest.
you know, so it's not logical. There's nothing logical about it, really. So how do you
But
even enter a conversation with folks that do not care to sit and reason with you? Because you know, at some point, you know, you're assuming reasonable people, right? That's your hope. At least if they're not agreeable, at least they're going to be reasonable, that you can be able to sit down with them. But like, it's like some of this stuff that you see is just like, even if, like, you can say the truth right there in front of people, they'll agree with it, but then if they think about it and it's not what they thought before, they'll be like, no, you know. I mean, I watched something today. I wish I had it pulled up so I could play it. But there was this thing from Comedy Central, and they always do these really from the Daily Show, and it was so funny just watching these interviews of people on the street, like how little the average American knows about anything.
Mm.
So how do you, like, what do you even talk about? You know, like, are we talking about, you know, just kind of pulling in people that we know to just start, or are we trying to get everybody involved? Because I don't believe that everybody even really wants to be involved, not in
so
this conversation.
so you know, here's an interesting question that I think is relevant. I mean, if I asked you, Eric or
Uh-huh.
Hannah, or anybody
Right.
in the large viewing audience that we have right now out there in the world, the worldwide audience that's watching us.
We're
Right.
breaking
If
the
I asked you,
internet.
if I asked you for a model of civil discourse that
Right.
that happens like on a regular basis, or that kids come across, or whatever, I mean, I find that really difficult to think of any where there are people who are engaging in disparate ideas with respect and with calm, and you know what I mean.
Right.
And I've often had this fantasy, and it literally is a fantasy. When Obama got elected, I thought, wouldn't it be great if once a month he pulled someone from the other side, they sat down in two chairs, fireplace in the background or whatever, right?
Right.
Nice lighting and everything else. And
Mm.
for half an hour, 45 minutes, they just debated something. They just talked
Right.
about it. And
Right.
how interesting it would be to watch two people, very passionate, who have very different, you know, viewpoints, to just talk. And we don't have any models for that. And so, I mean, I
Right.
think that we maybe want to try to get practical here, you know, in the
Right.
last few minutes here. But I think that might be an
Right.
interesting way of doing it if we had people come into classrooms and engage in respectful conversation around different ideas, and just let
Right.
kids observe it, you know. I
Mm.
don't know. Maybe that's
Good
one
idea, like
step
a
that we should begin
fishbowl.
to take. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know.
Like a fishbowl. I
Yeah.
have 3 models that I would like to share.
And we're
Please.
out of time,
The
so
first
no, go.
one, the first one is called dinner. So
Oh,
when
there you go.
people get together and have a meal, that is, like I always say, world peace starts at the dinner table. Like dinner.
Right.
You break bread with someone and magic can ensue. Like you don't want to be rude and yell and I saw a video of, I think it was BBC or a non-US news source, and they were holding up the United States as they were doing sound bites from the first presidential debate between Trump and Biden. And it was so, I mean, that was painful to watch. But they had just the most like harsh sound bites between them. It was just so rude and awful. It's not easy to do that at the dinner table. So one
Right.
thing, I think dinner. The problem is you have to have some relationship with the person in order to have dinner first. But there are, and I don't know, Elaine has put a comment, World Cafe, the World Cafe style of a conversation. Yes, that's a method of conversation that's really powerful. I have heard that more and more around the country, there are organizations that are setting up, even on Zoom, even in the remote world that we're in, these sort of dinner with a stranger sort of idea. So I think
Right.
that's really useful. The second one that I think is really helpful, and it goes back to an earlier comment that somebody made, if we cannot rely on schools to teach conversation, like what can we do? I think the reality is that teachers have not learned how to model it or how to show it, but when they receive certain effective training and when they learn certain skills, and this could be a plug for our Deeper Than Diversity workshop on November 13th, they
Yeah.
it makes a big difference. Like
Right.
teachers' colleges are not teaching those skills. So I think that these are the C's. Another C is citizenship. Like we haven't really learned. So there's citizenship in your country, and now that's kind of obsolete. We have to be global
Right.
citizens. So there's that. And then I would also, one model that I have seen for how to have an amazing discussion is the model, actually, I'm going to say it, of Baha'i consultation. And what Baha'i consultation, it's actually a thing. And what it means is when we come together to have a discussion, we know certain rules. And one of the rules is that um, when I share my idea to the group, it's no longer my idea. The group owns it. And so I no longer have to feel defensive or invested ego in that idea. I am trying to come up with a solution that is for the good of the group. And this is something
Mm-hmm.
that people around the world from many different backgrounds have been practicing. There's more to it, but it's pretty simple. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
that has been an area where people from many different education levels, perspectives, demographics, every type of diversity have been able to make pretty complex decisions across differences. So that's also another interesting. So that's an example of having certain norms for the discussion that are
Right.
known to work. And ego is a big one. So if you set that aside and you don't have to, it's like kind of like people in debate, you might have to take a position you don't agree with and argue it. It's like a deep empathy exercise, ideally. But usually debate
Right.
is about winning. So this is not about winning. This is about
Right.
relationship is powerful for the sake of relationship itself. Community is powerful for the sake of community itself. Learning is powerful for the sake of learning itself. And that actually goes directly against Michael Champion shared the US Department of Education goal. And one of the pieces of the goal was global competitiveness. And this is an area I've worked for many years in. And it's implying a zero-sum game. It is implying winners and losers. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
global sort of competencies and global citizenship for the sake of something bigger than yourself. And we know that when students work for something that's bigger than themselves, when it has purpose and meaning, they're happier and they perform better. So
Right.
Shocking.
I talked way too much. So,
Oh goodness.
but
Well,
Yeah, that's what I think.
yeah,
So I mean, you know, as you said, I mean, going back to those C words too, I think community is one right now that is just missing
Mm,
in just about
mhm.
everything. There's no physical space community, very little any longer. I'm always stunned by that statistic that, you know, when we were growing up, back when we had the
Yeah,
that pitch tone at midnight when the TV
in the
went out, back,
1900s.
back in the
yeah,
1900s.
in the
I think
1900s.
I'm gonna get the numbers wrong, but you'll get the sentiment right. Kids were able to wander somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 to 2.5 miles away from their houses, and it was like not
Right.
a big deal. And you know, I mean, I remember saying to my mom, you know, I'm gonna go out with my friends, and she was just like, okay, just be back for dinner, you know, and she had no idea where I was going or what I was
Mm,
doing or whatever. And now today it's like something literally like 200 yards, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
and so how do you explore your space? How do you explore the place that you live? How do you meet other people in your community? How do you feel a part, invested in what happens if you're only wandering 150 yards away from your home? And
mm,
so that's a problem. And then we get to school, and school really, again, the conditions that we create in schools aren't really nurturing a sense of community. They don't really nurture a spirit of let's do this together. Let's you know, build things together or solve problems together or whatever else. Let's care for one another. Let's have empathy. All those types of things are just not, they're not at the top of the list when it comes to what happens in school. And so, you know, again, it's a difficult moment when it comes to how things have changed, and we're old enough to know how they've changed, right? My children, 23 and 21, not really. You know, they don't remember a time when it was like that. They're finding community in other ways that I think is kind of interesting. And actually, you know, Home and I've been working with this international school group that has really built an interesting community, I think, online, totally online, by meeting
Mhm.
every week consistently and trusting one another and finding, you know, finding support from one another and kind of doing therapy for one another just to get through this moment that's been so exhausting.
Mhm.
But generally, we don't feel connected. And so I think, again, it's easy to connect to our emotions around, you know, what the world looks like and what it's supposed to be, rather than explore it in ways that allow us to broaden our understanding of it and to meet new people and opinions and narratives and all that other stuff. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, and now, with the pandemic and everything, they're telling you don't go here, don't go do this, don't interact with folks in this
mm,
particular way. So that kind of compounds that as well. So if you were not doing your 200 yards, around your house, then you're definitely not doing it now. You know.
yeah.
So I mean, it's so much pressure. Like now it's so much pressure and stress and Steve said something too, or I think it was Steve. They said something of, oh yeah, that the kids. Oh, and also there's no break in the news cycle. Kids
Right.
get no break at all. They're always online and not often on quality sources. And
Mhm.
I think that that's something too, is that there is no time. Like at least we knew that there really was nothing to do after midnight. And what my folks used to always say is that if you were doing
Well,
something after midnight, it probably was something that you didn't need to be doing
that's right.
anyway.
I mean, there were things to be doing after midnight. You just
There
didn't
were
see them on
things to be
TV,
doing,
right?
but if you probably didn't need
You
to
just
be
get in
doing.
trouble for it.
That's right. That's right.
And so but I think that just like I'm reminded of the work of Neil Postman.
Yeah.
Two books that I really, really like of his. Well, I like all of his work, but the first one that I read was Technopoly: The Surrender of Culture to Technology,
Yeah.
and the one that I'm reading now is Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Yeah.
And it's talking about how the human being is actually has been shaped during the age of television and entertainment.
Mm,
And and I always keep going, like even in all of my conversations and discussions about diversity and race and all these different things, I just keep coming back to what this civilization has made has what has this civilization said about what it means to be a human being. And I always keep going back to the essential kind of this foundational question: what are we? Like, what are we in this cosmos? And I know that's a big question, uh, um, but like getting back to living lives of purpose, you know,
Mm,
and what we've been told, and some of the things that have been mentioned is that education is so, you go to this good school, you get a good job, you do, it's a whole list of things that that will allow you to call yourself a successful human being on this planet, at least according to where we live. And so, and up until this point, I don't think that for the most part that has been questioned that much. But what happens when you can't go to work, or you can't be in that same space, or you can't make the money that you thought you were going to make because, wow, a pandemic started in March and your business doesn't exist anymore. So I think that what this whole thing is driving people to is, and I think that there's a lot of fear in the world because people had probably attached so much of their life's purpose to things that they were doing before this stuff happened, and now they can't do it anymore. And I think a lot of people are just
mm.
terrified. And so what I see, all of that kind of inflammatory language and the just what appears to be anger, I think a lot of it is more fear than anything.
Mm.
Because the world is changing so fast, and you have folks talking. It's interesting just even listening to the discourse about global competitiveness. When folks still don't really have a clear concept that we have been interacting with countries and cultures across the globe for centuries, really.
And
Or let
extracting the
yeah,
conversation we had and extracting from them. So we've been,
yeah,
there
extracting
has
from
been
them,
this
and
global
then yeah,
competitiveness of extraction
right,
that our kids,
a
why
lot
do
of
we need to
imbalance.
teach them that?
But
Yeah,
so okay,
I
so
mean,
so I'll go there,
yeah,
right? And I think a
yeah,
lot of
go there.
I think a lot of it too is about old white guyism, right? And I think that that's something that is beginning to really scare people who are old white guys because they see their power
Right.
leaving them as it will and as it should. And there was a great quote that I tweeted this morning that I can't remember exactly what it was, but it said something along the lines of the old stuff is dying, but the new stuff can't be born quite yet, right? Can't be born
Right.
quite. It's trying. It's trying to, to get into this world, and it's trying to manifest itself in a much better arc, but there's still some stuff that we have to shed. There's just still some stuff that we have to work our way through before we can get to a point where we can create a really new beginning. And again, just to kind of pull it back to where this conversation is or started, and a lot of that has to do with education. A
Right.
lot of that has to do with making sure that we're talking about these contexts. I mean, again, I tweet this stuff out all the time, just stuff that's happening. And, I'm like, are you seeing
Hmm.
this? This is the new curriculum. This is what we have to be talking about. These are the things that are changing that we have to bring into our classrooms and discuss. Forget
Hmm.
trigonometry, forget Shakespeare, forget a whole bunch of stuff that is just legacy content that no one ever uses or talks about or think. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Let's talk about these changes that are happening that affect all of us, and we can do that. We can absolutely do that without being partisan about it. We can
Right.
simply offer it up and say, let's discuss this. You know, what are the implications of this? And let's really think about that stuff. So I do think that this moment is just, it's fascinating. If you can step back
Mhm.
from it,
It is.
if you can step back from it just a little bit and kind of like take the
Yeah.
glasses off and just kind of
Mhm.
look at it, and you kind of go, holy cow, you know, there's so much stuff that's happening right now. And so, and, you know, Steve said, you know, write the book of this time, you know, from 2050. Yeah, I mean, try to even think of what people are going to look back and think of this particular moment, and how many things, hopefully, in 30 years will be vastly different because of this horrible struggle that we're in the middle of right now, you know, and we
Mhm.
just are the lucky ones who
Yeah.
happen to be here
Right.
to witness it, you know. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane, hi Jane. Jane, I know Jane through
Jane Bishop.
her engagement in our webinars,
Jane
but
comes to
she says,
everything that
"Are
we
you
do. We
willing?"
love Jane.
Love you. Yeah. And Anna, are you willing to get less so others can get some? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So Will has kids in who are in their 20s. I have kids in their 20s. And what I notice about this generation is acquisition isn't as much of it, it's not the
Right.
priority in this generation, especially if you have awareness of climate issues. Um, it's almost unsavory. My generation was all about acquisition. So that is one of those things I think that is being shed. It really it seems so unsavory to them. Um, so maybe not everybody, but I think that it's sort of again like when you become aware, it's like when you turn on the light to what's going on, it's hard not to see, and you can't unsee a lot of that.
Mhm.
So
And see.
um, I am just wondering if maybe to wrap up, maybe there's like one final uh, positive step or tip, because otherwise it is like really easy to go down
Well, it's
into
heavy,
a
right?
hole of negative
Yeah.
heaviness. Yes.
Mhm.
But
Um,
I think we have to acknowledge that it is really heavy. I mean, you know, and
it is.
this is one of the, if not the most difficult moment that many of us have experienced, and we of privilege. I mean, imagine people who don't have the same privileges that we do, and the suffering that they're going through right now. So it is
Yeah.
really,
Right.
really heavy. But I think, you know, the optimist in me says, well, so you just work harder, you know, and you just keep working at it, and you keep trying, and like I said, there
Mhm.
are there are small little lights that are starting to shine, that are changing things. They're on the fringes, they're not mainstream. I don't know how they scale to be honest with you, but they're there, right? They're there, and there is an awakening that's happening, but it's just not the time for that full bloom to happen right now. And I
Right.
don't know how long it'll take, but I am optimistic that it will happen.
Well, I also wanted to just bring up one point before we disappear is that, I the other thing, and since Will brought it up, you know, we, he mentions old white guys, but it's old white guys and their wives too, apparently, from this election.
That's true.
Uh,
Okay.
so and we can't discount the women's involvement in those things because they're
No.
raising the sons. Um, but there is one thing, is that we have, when we think about how we're changing this world, I think that oftentimes we have a perspective that we have to go through those old white guys to change it, but we don't. Like, we really don't. Like, old white guys are a minority on the planet. And there are other systems of knowledge and education that have been developed outside of kind of and you all know, and I mean, Will and Homer, you both know this because you're global educators, but that there have been populations that have had to endure this civilization and that have found ways to thrive even in these contexts. So what if those other knowledge systems were actually brought into conversation in a particular way so that they could flourish, instead of having to always work from a context of just surviving racism or oppression or something like that? And so I don't believe that we even have to go through anybody to get to this point. I actually believe that what we want to see, like those little points of light that you mentioned, Will, like communities all over the world that have been doing remarkable things under a lot of duress,
Yeah.
which means that they have exercised their muscles under all of these different things. And when they actually get to go forth with a lot less friction, they're going to explode and flourish. And so I also think that we have to find those stories as well and tell this good news, because even though we're seeing this old world just kind of dying away, we can build. There's still one that is emerging, I believe, and that we can see. But I also believe that we're going to have to look outside of these traditional means of community. Homa, I don't know if the other day you mentioned the whole thing about was it the hierarchy of needs and the TP and things like that? I thought that
I'm
was a
obsessed
really,
with it.
really,
We should just do a whole session on that.
Yeah, you should.
yeah, like that whole thing, and about
Definitely.
that model. But that model was not his originally. That was an indigenous model that he
Blackfoot
basically
Nation,
reduced.
Right.
Blackfoot
Right.
Nation of
And
Canada.
so there are these communities with these expansive notions of civilization that we have pushed to the margins for the last 4 or 5 centuries. And it's time to bring them to the center and draw from that wisdom that they've accumulated during these extreme times of duress. Because I think that there are so many gems that never just even cross our desk, because this society has taken all of those people. Like, and I come from one of those communities. I talk about this all the time about how the primary way that my value system was conveyed to me was through family, community, and music. That was their language. And still I can't go to a conservatory in the United States and use that as a credit to get a degree in what I do, even if I do it better than kids that have gone through the conservatory, because I went through the conservatorium of the Black church. But that's where my value system came from. So there are all these other places that we can look to, because they see a lot more clearly what has been happening. Who better understands colonization than colonized? So I think that the world that we're looking for is here. We just haven't networked it together yet.
It reminds me
So
of
how do we get the people into the room?
That's a
it
great
reminds
point.
me of Paul Hawkins' book Blessed Unrest, right? That
That's one of my favorites. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
under the radar, under the surface, there are all these movements and people
Mm.
who are putting together, great deeds, and that at some point, hopefully, they'll all come together, and
Right.
That's a great. So that's a great idea those are some great points, I think, to end on. It's a little after the hour. And I
Right.
think we were thinking we were going to go 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but I think we're just getting started.
So I'm gonna just try one thing here, because those of you who are watching, you can probably tell we're using some different software. So on the chat in this particular software, there's a little link that can add people to the broadcast. So Jane, I'm gonna see if we can add you to the broadcast. So, oh, I see. So it just comes up on screen.
Yeah, you can add her
Get
comment.
it.
Right.
Add her comment, but not her.
Oh, darn. I mean, the comment's great, but that would have been really
We
fun.
wanted
We'll
we wanted you in a
invite
square.
next time. All right.
Well, that's a fun idea. Well, this was so fun. I really enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. We Blessed Unrest is the
Unrest,
book.
not
Yeah,
arrest.
yeah, yeah,
Although there might
yeah,
be a blessed arrest in someone's future, but we
Yeah,
yeah.
won't go there either.
yeah.
So,
This is, I feel like this was a close getting together with a great group of, this is like our
it
close
was
circle of
fun.
friends. So thank
Right.
you. And
All right.
Uh-huh.
we'll see what happens tomorrow. But
And
I just want to say one thing. Don't be afraid to start conversations. Start them respectfully. Everybody I've ever met in a school is hungry for conversation. So
absolutely,
don't you think that's a place to begin?
absolutely.
Hmm.
All
Yeah.
right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much
Okay,
Good
for
that was
night.
listening.
fun.
Appreciate it. Bye bye.
Bye
Thanks.
bye.